Welcome to That Annuity Show, the podcast that will make you an expert in explaining annuities to your clients. Give us 30 minutes each week and we'll shave hours from your client presentations. Now, here's your host, Paul Tyler.
Hi, this is Paul Tyler, and welcome to another episode of That Annuity Show. Bruno, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Happy
Good.
to be here.
Glad to have you from the north. Tisa?
Good morning, everyone.
Yeah, good to see you. Tisa and I were just spent time with 50 or so of our top agents, so we'll have some interesting color to add to this discussion. Ramsey, we have some very interesting returning guests for our show. Do you want to do the intros?
Yes, and coming in from the South, representing the South, Ramsey Smith. Glad to be here, and super happy to welcome back two old friends of the show. I know that Michael's probably been on. This is probably Michael's third time, and I mean, yes, Tamiko, this may be sort of fifth or sixth for you at this point. So great to have you back, and really delighted to talk to you about your latest chapter. We've had the good fortune of actually having you on the show a number of times, talking about all the various ways that each of you have contributed to the retirement space, and we're very eager to talk today about Income Path. So, by way of introduction, we're here with Tamiko Toland, who's the CEO of Income Path, and who is known in the industry as the Annuity Yoda. And she's here with the very person that actually coined that phrase, Michael Finke, who is a professor of wealth management at the American College of Financial Services, co-founder and chief strategist of Income Path, and I will say, one of a very small group of really influential speakers in the retirement space over the last I'll call it sort of 4, 5, 6 years. So thanks again for joining us. So with that, why don't we jump right into it? Would love to hear how you guys came upon this sort of latest iteration of your contributions in the space.
Well, Ramsey, let me talk to you a little bit about how the basic idea for Income Path started. So I've been doing a lot of research in the retirement income space for over a decade now. I did an article back in 2012 that modeled flexible withdrawal strategies. I did it with Wade Pfau. One of the things we wanted to show is the traditional way that financial advisors in the investment advising industry had thought about creating income from an investment portfolio, the 4% rule. It's kind of a economically sound way to think about it, that you're going to try to figure out a lifestyle that you can maintain, a rigid lifestyle that you can maintain and not run out of money over the course of, say, 30 years. But it's not really the way that an economist would do it. An economist would say there's trade-offs. And when you don't know how long you're going to live, when you don't know what kind of investment returns you're going to get, you have to be willing to be a little bit flexible. And if you can be flexible, then you can spend more money. Part of the genesis also came from an interview that I did. I actually did a video interview for the American College back in 2019 with Bill Sharpe. And during the interview, Bill took me aside and showed me some simulations that he was working on. He wanted to model a variable annuity. And so, he was working with Vanguard, and Vanguard at the time was offering a variable annuity. I think it was actually a GMWB. And he wanted to understand how the ratchets would perform in different types of market environments. And so what he was doing was he was simulating the various income paths. He did a Monte Carlo. He simulated what the paths could look like. And as I was sitting there talking to him about how to visualize retirement income, because one of his big points is, how do you get people to understand that there is a probability distribution of investment returns? It's a bell, you have a bell-shaped curve of investment returns. You throw it at your investment assets every year, and that creates a range of different outcomes. But you also don't know how long you're going to live. So how can you help people understand the probability distribution of lifestyles that you could experience in retirement? And in fact, I did an article for Think Advisor back in 2019 on the interview that I did with Bill. And one of the points, actually 4 times I use the term income path to describe, because it really made an impression on me, that the best way for people to understand how to create an income and what your different trade-offs are and how to make choices about investment risk is to show them the various paths that their lifestyle could take. And really, a lot of the last few years has been about refining the methodology of how to create a visualization for that income path, and also how to create a goal-based process that gets you to the point where the end result is a visualization of that income. So really, the genesis for income path was the modeling of a variable annuity. However, in the process of developing the methodology for income path, it really opened my eyes to what an annuity does to your path of income. So if you think of income as being a range of different lifestyle outcomes, and if you allocate a portion of your savings to an annuity, how does that affect the range of different lifestyles? And what became very apparent is that when we don't have an annuity, in order to maintain a relatively smooth path of spending over time, we have to ensure that we're not going to run out in our 90s. So we have to be excessively conservative early on in retirement. And because nobody really fails. So one of the big problems with the 4% rule is that it begins with this conversation about failure. And I think that if that's wrong for so many reasons, it's technically wrong to assume that any retiree, as they're running out of money, would not cut back on their spending. It's also wrong to begin the conversation about retirement income planning with such a negative way of framing it, because people are nervous enough. They don't know how to turn their savings into income. And if the first thing you show them is a Monte Carlo that tells them they have a 15% chance of failure, does that give them any confidence in their retirement income plan? And even if you try to position the value of the annuity within that failure rate lens, it confuses people. It doesn't give them a very clear idea of why it is that they're taking a portion of their savings and buying an annuity. And what became very apparent when we were designing the income path is it is far clearer to understand why you allocate a portion of your savings to an annuity. It gives you a much more desirable path of income.
So that's very interesting. It's in the industry, there is a habit of relying on sort of fear-based discussion to help sort of motivate, right? And that's, I would argue, that's in any element. That's financial advisors, that's those that sell insurance. Like, that's part of the sort of the conversation. But the way you're positioning is very interesting. It's very much focusing on the range of positive outcomes. So I can see why psychologically it's a very different approach. Well, tell us a little bit about how the two of you came together, right? I mean, again, operating in the same space for a lot of years, and worked in a lot of very similar channels. How did you guys come together to actually bring this new company to fruition?
So actually, Michael and I have been collaborators to some extent on, different projects since the original Annuity Yoda moniker came up. And we just stayed in touch. And originally we had actually talked last year when I was still at TIA, and I had encouraged him to, think about creating something that was better than what was out there. One of the things that we've both seen, and he talks a lot to financial professionals, and he keeps on hearing the message, we don't have something that we think really shows the annuity well. We want something better. And that the existing software platforms are focused more around investments, are focused around all these details, but they don't show the annuity well. So it just so happened, the timing worked out great for us to work on this project together. And I guess the rest is history, I want to say.
Yeah,
So
I like
on Ramsey's comments earlier, through the LinkedIn post, through the website, and through everybody's comments, I feel there's kind of a positive aspect and an upside on annuities. It's not just about minimizing your downside risk. It's not just about playing defense, If you look at the overall comprehensive plan, annuities are there to play their role, and also an offensive role. Is that the spirit also of Income Path, is to bring this forward into a kind of more positive and more offensive play, as opposed to some of the connotations that are currently there.
Yeah, Bruno, that really was the insight when we were developing the tool, that we had to come up with some sort of methodology for spending. And one of the aspects of the methodology is that we allow people to spend more when markets do well. So when you take investment risk, then you should be able to benefit. I have been for a long time talking about using a goal-based process where you have a continuum of your lifestyle. You have more inflexible, more flexible expenses. And when you take investment risk, you do it for spending categories that you are willing to be flexible, but that also means that if you get lucky, you should be able to live better. That's why you take risk in the first place, is that, on average, your lifestyle is going to be better. Could be worse. You have to be flexible, but on average, you can spend more. And what the annuity does is, especially if you're substituting it for, say, the bond portion of an investment portfolio, it generates more income per dollar in retirement from that portion of the portfolio, which means that you can withdraw less from the remainder of your investment assets. And essentially, it takes less pressure, or it takes pressure off of the remainder of your assets. And when you look at the path of income, the upside is actually significantly higher. The downside is also higher, and the median is higher, but the upside is higher. And I think that's an aspect that is not well understood about the value of incorporating an annuity into a retirement income strategy. Oftentimes, it's positioned as a floor. It's more than that. It really allows you to spend more at every age across the distribution of potential outcomes. And that, to me, that was an insight that I hadn't really fully wrapped my brain around until we developed the methodology. But once we had created a framework to be able to visualize it, it became really obvious that, oh yeah, this is why I do it. And we wanted to be able to allow the advisor to work with the client to understand, to give them a much deeper understanding of why it is that they would take a portion of their savings and use it to buy an annuity. Because I just don't think the flooring is evocative enough. And it also focuses on the conservatism, when the reality is that you can actually improve the upside outcomes as well.
Yeah, and Michael, I think you're spot on. As I mentioned earlier, Tisa and I just spent about 3 or 4 days with some of our top agents and advisors, and I would easily say, Tisa, probably 80% of these individuals have an asset management practice, right? I mean, is that fair? Yeah, and they're selling an annuity, Michael, in context with an investment portfolio, and it's kind of hard for us as carriers to say, oh, but take this product because, oh, by the way, it'll allow your clients to take more risk or do more interesting things with your assets. But I think advisors are there. And I think it's great to have a tool that would support this. One question I have coming back, though, to the emotional side, we talked a little bit about fear. Great conversation with an advisor who's, he must have been, I think he's probably in his early 70s, former minister, now selling annuities, and does a lot of work with people who work in the government. He said, Paul, these people are so afraid. There's so much fear of change, fear of what's going to happen with tax rates, fear of how are you thinking about making people feel confident with your software? How will it make me feel better at the end?
So, that's what the visualization is really about, is allowing people to see the difference between not having the annuity and then having the annuity. And how do you feel about those two pictures, and what's your preference? What's also important to us is that people be able to modulate kind of up and down, like how much annuity, go up, go down a little bit, play around with the equity piece of it to get to the right place. It's really meant to be directional. So it's, we are not dealing with account specifics, taxation, tax location, asset allocation. So we're, it's very high level to get people to understand, okay, well, what's the right amount of annuity for me that is going to make me feel right, to exactly your point around the fear, right? Without necessarily relying entirely on that floor-based planning approach. It is aspirational, but also, reducing the equity allocation does tighten those results. And you can see that. So you can see how the annuity sort of pushes everything up. And then you can see how turning up and down that equity allocation either expands or contracts the results that you're likely to get.
Can you speak a little bit? So thinking about the tool, I was sitting here thinking like this, like shift from like fear to understanding the flexibility, right? Of being able to, like to your point, dial up or down, or kind of focus more on the income opportunity more than the sort of scary or fear part of not having enough. So my question is like, just around the tool, like what are some of the inputs? Are thinking about like behavior shift or mindset shift? Are they able to just put in values? Are they putting in, when I say values, I mean like numeric values? Do they set goals? Are they financial goals? Or are they more aspirational goals? Like, I want to go on the big trip. I'm just curious how the tool helps shift their mindset.
That's a really great question, Tisa. So as far from an input perspective, we have an extremely simple set of basic inputs, and there's expanded inputs for like getting specific carrier illustration information in there, which is honestly, it's like just a couple fields if you get into those specifics. But there are, in order to calculate something, you need numerical goals. And so the behavioral piece is actually more integrated into the guide that goes along with it, and that goal-based process that Michael mentioned, as well as how you interact with the visualization. But how you interact with that is informed by your understanding of everything that's kind of underneath it. So we do complicated math, but it's shoved underneath the pictures. So we're not really requiring people to understand these complicated concepts. But on the spending flexibility piece of it, a lot of folks look at like needs and wants. And so it's a very simplified view. But we actually add layers on top of that so people have a better visualization of their own aspirational goals. So if I had more money, if I got lucky and were able to spend more, what would I spend it on? So how important is that to me? And then you're able to see where your spending target is for the first year. And then that's the starting baseline off of which the spending flexibility is. And there's some things to tweak that with. We have a lot of defaults in there. And a lot of it's around helping to explain these principles. But that idea of aspirational goals, we're really framing quite differently from what I think is the standard.
Like one of the difficulties that I think the entire industry is struggling with is to have people visualize themselves in 20, 30 years. I think, anything that can happen today, I may have a car accident, I'll buy car insurance. I may die tomorrow, I have life insurance. But what is that going to look like in 20, 30 years? What is that picture going to look like for myself, for the economy, for so many, from so many angles? My question is, what are some of the tools and strategies and visuals that you're using in order to illustrate and to convey that reality that you may be living in 30, 35 years?
Yeah, so part of the income path visualization tool is the ability to imagine what happens to the path of your income when you hit your 90s. And when you don't partner with an institution to take that longevity risk off your plate, you have two choices. And your two choices are, you could be very conservative, which is part of the 4% rule. The 4% rule is kind of weird because it is excessively conservative to make sure that you can maintain the exact same after inflation lifestyle up through age 95. But we actually want you to imagine how much you could spend beyond the age of 95, because a lot of Americans are going to live beyond the age of 95. They need to understand the consequences of those choices. That's one of the problems with the 4% rule. All it gives you is a failure rate, but it doesn't give any context to what failure means. When you show the adjustment element of it, we don't assume that you're going to fail. We assume that you're going to adjust. And when you adjust, that has consequences. And one of the most important consequences, Bruno, is that you can spend more money early on in retirement if you're willing to adjust your spending later on. And I was just looking at some of the data from the Health and Retirement Study on fun spending categories, things like going on vacations or, going out to dinner with friends, all the things that make life worth living. And what I see is that kind of spending is highest in your late 60s, 70s. It goes down every decade after that, to the point where people with a lot of money are actually not spending much more on those categories by the time they hit their 90s than people who have less money. We want to be able to give people the freedom to be able to spend some of the money that they've saved, more of it early on. So you have the ability to then modulate your initial spending. You can, if you have $1 million, you can spend $50,000 a year. You can spend $55,000 a year if you want to, but that's going to change the slope of your lifestyle. Spend $55,000, it's going to be more stable, at least the amount of income that you can generate from your savings. Now, there's going to be situations where you get lucky and you can spend more. There's going to be situations where you get unlucky and you have to spend less. But you have the power to choose the path of income that you want. And to me, everybody needs to be given that choice. It shouldn't be that your default is an incredibly conservative spending strategy where you're not able to live well when you can enjoy the money the most, when you're most, physically and cognitively capable of enjoying the money. We're actually trying to give you the ability to feel comfortable that you're not going to run out if you spend a little bit more early on. And again, that's one of the benefits of incorporating an annuity, is that you don't have to be so conservative early on in life, because you have that income that is going to get generated from that portion of your savings later on in life.
Yeah. We've had Tom Hegg on a couple of times, and he has sort of simplified, the model to the go-go years, the slow go, and then the no-go years. How does that line up with the data you're looking at?
It lines up pretty well. There have been a couple of different studies by using different data sets, but generally speaking, spending on those types of categories does tend to fall. And it really means you have to pay attention to how if you think about it, it's like if you're a 65-year-old woman, on average, you've got 5 rows of 5, let's say squares, and you have a certain amount of chips. And you can lay your chips on each one of those, and they each represent a year of your life, 66, 67, 85. Where do you want to lay your chips? Do you want to lay your chips early on in retirement when you can get more enjoyment out of it? Do you want to just hold all those chips aside for late in retirement when you may not even be alive? What is the right allocation? Well, I think people should have a little bit more control over that. And they should also have the ability to choose whether or not they want to buy an annuity as a way of allowing them to put more chips on each square, to say, I'm going to be able to spend more at every age by delegating that longevity risk to an institution.
Yeah, and then how do you think about healthcare? Because I look at a lot of studies, and I think I agree. From looking at my parents, grandparents' spending habits matches, there's always a big explosion at the very end with the healthcare. How are you thinking about that in modeling this? Is assuming Medicare, what kind of assumptions you're making about healthcare costs, et cetera?
We're not. So, one of the points that Tamiko mentioned earlier is that this is high level, and we're showing you the potential paths that your income could take. Now, you might talk to your advisor about, let's make sure that we have enough later on in life to cover some of those healthcare expenses. David Blanchett, who I do a lot of work with, he's found that actually, healthcare expenses do go up later in life. But when they do go up, you're not doing much else. So, you're not spending a whole lot on other categories other than healthcare. So the aggregate spending actually doesn't go up later on in life after inflation. But that's part of this discussion of lifestyle and how much of that lifestyle do you want to preserve for later. If you're very fearful of it, then you might want to preserve more lifestyle for later, which means that you spend less early on and you buy an annuity.
Yeah, so I'm probably not going on an Alaska cruise and getting my kidney taken out, basically.
Probably not.
In your 90s, no. Certainly not.
I've also heard comments, probably more around just in the aging parent conversation of kind of those no-go years, the assets are there, but the companions are gone. So whether it's the spouse or it's the group of girlfriends, sort of being the lone or last survivor. So that's something I've heard in conversations where they impact as to why, in particular, something like travel or going out to eat slows down because you're kind of left without that social circle. So just another variable.
So let's talk about. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Tisa, did you have a question
it was a
or as
comment
well?
more than a question. Yeah, just kind of another variable in that and thinking through those years. Go ahead, Ramsey.
So what's interesting is this is an important thought process, and like so many things in our general space, it's like, well, how do we get the message out? How do we present this to potential users? And so I guess my next question is like, what is your target audience? Is it consumers? Is it advisors? Is it institutions? Is it all of the above? Like, where do you think you can most impactfully and quickly get this tool into the market?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Ramsey. Our launch strategy is really, we're building the tool right now. And so we're going to bring it out for subscription for individual financial professionals soon. And at the same time, we're having strategic conversations with different institutions, looking for pilot partners. There's a lot of folks are really interested in this. And the thing is, it doesn't replace any of the existing software. It's really more of an adjunct, like, kind of lift out of the planning process and answer that specific question of how much annuity do I need? And then also kind of inform that equity allocation question on the remaining portfolio. So you can really accomplish those two things. The great thing is that for those advisors that do wealth management and where they have the asset management piece and do a much more complicated, tax structure and what have you, that they have the ability to do that. It's just separate. And we also really are thinking about this, not just as, that point in time at retirement, or let's say you're purchasing an annuity 10 years ahead of time and you're buying it. And then it's like, oh, we're going to set it and forget it. That's not how it works. Right. I mean, that's not how retirement works. It takes so many decades to go through retirement. All kinds of crazy stuff happens. You have a spouse die, you have somebody's wedding and kids going to college and this and that you want to deal with. And so you've got to be able to pivot. And so we really see this as an evaluation process, coming back in and saying, is this still the right amount of income for me? Am I happy with that income path? Because the late life illustration is, it's not accurate for anybody. Like literally, like we always look at these illustrations and we see, 30, 40 years out, this is what it looks like. Well, that's not what it looks like. Chances are, something different is going to happen. So we want to make sure that this is really a tool for advisors to use with their clients, not just at the beginning of retirement or the beginning of the planning process, but as an ongoing review measure.
Got it.
Now,
thank you.
Do you have a wait list? Like, we've got a lot of avid, listeners on our show. If people wanted to get on, is there a sheet or someplace I can sign up to
there is.
First one's on?
Yeah, thanks. If you go to incomepath.com, you can sign up for notification when the tool is ready. You can also, like, if you're from a larger system and you want to talk to us about how to integrate it, do customization. We have to include training on how to use the tool and how to use the process. There's a lot of philosophy that kind of goes around that. Folks are really interested in learning about it all. And we are talking to people at all ends of the spectrum. Well, it's both. That spectrum's two things. Sorry, both ends of the spectrum in terms of degree of sophistication of the practice and like what it is that they're actually offering. So, contact us through the website. Also, follow us on LinkedIn, Income Path. Very straightforward. We have lots of insights that we put out, and we're very easy to find there.
Yeah, well, this was great. I guess, Michael, question for you is greatest opportunity to grow this market space. Obviously, this tool is great. Do you think if we looked at this effort, is this going to make it, easier for advisors who are not, sort of annuity specialists to sell annuities? Is that you think the primary impact?
I mean, to me, it is the ability to help retirees recognize the benefit of putting part of their savings into an annuity. That's part of it is just the philosophy of the benefit of being flexible with your spending, but part of it is trying to solve the annuity puzzle, which is how do you get people to actually do what economists say everybody should be doing, which is taking a portion of their savings and put it into an annuity, and then being able to illustrate the impact of different types of products, et cetera, on that income path. To me, that's my goal. It's to get advisors to work with clients to be able to visualize how to make the most important choices in retirement. It's a very high-level tool. It's not competing with these other more sophisticated kind of tax planning, those type of financial planning tools. This is really about how to make the high-level decisions about the most important decisions that you have to make. That's how much longevity risk are you willing to take? What path of income do you want it to look like? How much do you want to put into an annuity? That's the purpose of this thing. And so I do think that it will allow more advisors to recognize the benefit of incorporating an annuity into a retirement income plan. And I think, frankly, it needs to. I mean, a lot of advisors have dismissed annuities for a very long time. They don't recognize the value. They call them things like expensive, when the reality is that there is a range of prices. They do something that no other investment asset can do, contrary to what our friend Ken says. You can only do you can do something with annuities that you can't do with traditional investments. This is a way of visualizing what that does.
Love it. Bruno, any final thoughts or observations here?
So many, but I'll try to keep it brief. No, I think this is wonderful. More income focused, a different cut, a different slice, a different way to look at those plans is needed in society, and on healthcare as well. I think the whole healthcare, we call it the annuitization puzzle, but the healthcare puzzle strengthens the point on income path, because if you're going to live longer, you need more income to support those healthcare expenses. So no, kudos, thank you, and thanks for coming on.
Tisa, you've worked with a lot of advisors, a lot of software tools.
Yeah, so I'm excited to sign up. I'm already trying to get over to LinkedIn and follow you guys for when the tool launches. But I think what I'm hearing is most exciting is this idea of inspiring that visualization, thinking more about the options and flexibility versus, I'll say, the doom and gloom, but at least just not the negative and risk-averse way of looking at things. So appreciate what you're bringing to market.
Yeah. Ramsey?
So same thing. I just want to echo, thanks for bringing this. I sometimes heard the statistic that, 65% of people are visual learners. I think it's at least that many. I think it's very easy to get lost in even minor details of many of the solutions that the financial services industry brings to consumers and even to other financial services professionals. So to have something that is visual first and really helps people kind of understand and feel what they're essentially the decision they're making, I think is super important. So thank you for bringing that to market. And thank you for the two of you for what you both have done in this space over the course of the last, decade at this point. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I'll just, put a check mark with what everyone else said. Michael, thanks for coming back. Appreciate it. Tamiko, thanks so much not only for showing up here, but also coming out to join us in Las Vegas on April 8th through 10th on some really good panels. So if
including mine,
including yours. Yeah. Ramsey. Yeah. So we're, anyway, thanks so much. And we'll put a link to your website in our show notes, but thanks for being here. We want to thank our listeners. Please share this episode, share your comments, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of That Annuity Show. Thanks.
Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend us on iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more information at thatannuityshow.com.